Yes, guys, what is happening? Welcome back to the Adapts Performance Podcast. In this episode, I have got Cavan, who is a PhD student at Sheffield Hallam. He is going to be chatting through AI, artificial intelligence, and how we can use that in sport, how we can essentially make our lives a little bit easier in terms of what we, want to achieve and get the most out of your bodies, get the most out of your time. So unreal episode. I'm a little bit mind blown, to be honest with you. We go into everything from, injuries. Can we predict injuries? We go into it being able to save time from a performance analysis standpoint. And then I do a little bit of a sneaky one and I ask him how I can use AI to enhance my business. How can I get better results? How can I save more time? How can I work with more athletes? And it's really interesting, that. And if any of you are like strength athletes out there, or of Juggernaut have a program which is called Juggernaut AI. And I believe the idea is essentially it's an ever evolving program and it asks you feedback on certain things. And, it's interesting how the landscape is changing a little bit. And we look at apps like Metric and the velocity-based training apps that I spoke about with Steve Thompson a few podcasts ago. So, yeah, the world is changing, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a really exciting thing. This is an absolute quality podcast. What's been going on in terms of Adapt? So we released the announcement that we now have a physio working with us. So we have essentially an MDT, a multidisciplinary team. We have a S&C coach. Well, you have S&C coaches. There's me and Joe that work on the programs together. We then have a physio. We have a performance nutritionist and we have a psychologist. So essentially now our athletes have everything they would ever need to achieve exactly what they want to achieve. It's as close to an elite level setup that I feel like you're going to get in the online space. So super excited, really big steps forward for us. Athletes are buzzing. The community group is, buzzing. Yeah, I'm just super happy. Anyway, right, without further ado, let's get into the podcast. This is me and Cavan. Yes, Cavan, how's it going, mate? Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. I can see you sipping on I think it's a latte.
Cappuccino, actually. It's cappuccino tomorrow. Yeah.
A fancy latte.
Need the coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it, mate. Sweet. What you got on for today? What's the plan?
Just work really. Rest day from the gym, so just getting on with work. I've got a few things coming up for like the PhD, like checkpoint things. So things with that. Term starts. I start teaching again next week, so getting prepped for that. Them kind of things. Just admin kind of jobs really.
This is like the start before the PTSD starts. I always remember that with like term time. We all know that the impending doom is coming. Students are back. You're not going to be able to breathe. Yeah, it's coming. Mate, that's sick. So just to begin with then, do you want to give the listeners and me, a little bit of an insight into who you are and what you do, what you're interested in?
Yeah, so like John mentioned, my name's Cavan. I'm a PhD student and lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, and it's kind of rolled up in this nice title of graduate teaching associate at Sheffield Hallam. So my role is I teach on sports science, the undergrad course at Sheffield Hallam, mainly focused on biomechanics and performance analysis is my background really, and I'll get on to that in a second. And then I've been doing my PhD. I'm in about just over a year into that now, so really enjoying it more than I never thought it'd be something I'd do. From like an academic perspective, but really enjoying it. In terms of like my history and what I've done before, in terms of like professionally, I was at Sheffield Hallam from 2018. I started my undergrad sports science course there in 2018, and then straight after that went straight into the sports science masters at Hallam, and then just because of work and things I did before. So I was throughout my time at Sheffield Hallam, I did a placement at Sheffield Steelers and just carried on working there after that as a performance analyst. So using data and video to analyze performance of athletes, of the team, analyze opposition, things like that. So I've always been a very numbers focused kind of person, quantitative side, that kind of thing. Did a few other things in performance analysis as well. So I worked for a ice hockey scouting company And what we did was we used just videos and data for kids in Europe and in America, just trying to get them into better teams, things like that. It was just kind of a side hustle kind of thing that I did, which was really good. I think it gave me a lot of perspective on working both sides at like a professional level, but then also working with the kids and seeing the differences. And it gave me actually a good understanding of the game doing that, I think, because if you just watch really good ice hockey, I know obviously the British ice hockey is not the best in the world, but if you're watching professional level all the time, I think it's nice to actually take a step back and look at the kids level and then how it progresses over the years, because we did things from some like 7-8-year-olds all the way up to like 16, 17. So you get a good kind of breadth of experience there. So I did that for a few years on my master's and on my undergrad, and it just didn't. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And when I finished, as I was coming towards the end of my master's, I thought I can either get a job in it, and I know I don't really enjoy it as much as I would maybe other things. And then I kind of just thought I really enjoy university. I enjoy the environment. The people are nice. So I thought, why not try and do a PhD here? And I'm not sure at other universities, so I've had quite a closed lifestyle. I've only been at Hallam, but just how things have worked in my life, it's just been easier to stay here, and the people are nice, and it's a good university, especially for sport research. I've got no faults about it. I really enjoy it. And just on the masters especially, I really enjoy writing like the dissertations side of it. So I thought, why not go on to a PhD? And Sheffield Hallam have a really good scheme called like the Graduate Teaching Associate Scheme, where they get your funding. You get funding for your PhD. You get a salary, or it's more of a stipend kind of thing, but you get paid to do it, and you get to teach. So you get a wide range of experience. And I think if anyone's listening and have tried to get on a PhD or has gotten a PhD, the hardest actual bit is trying to get the funding to get on it. That's what a lot of people find difficult about it. It's not so much the idea, or obviously the work is hard, but actually that first step of getting onto it, because you think not a lot of people want to do PhDs, but when you actually try and apply for one, there are a lot of people that actually want to do them because they're a limited space, obviously. So it was just things worked out, and I kind of went on to that. So yeah, so I'm a year into it now, mainly focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning in sport. My main focus is really, so I'm more from a sports science background rather than a computer science background. Obviously, I do some coding and things like that, but I'm more focused on the application of AI in sport rather than creating new things, because there are plenty of people cleverer than me in computer science that are making new technology, but actually nobody's really trying to apply that. It's all good having all this good technology that we have, but nobody's really applying it. Only in small case study sizes, unless sport organizations are reaching out and saying we need this specific thing. But a lot of the time, sport organizations don't know what's out there. They don't know if you work in sport and you like technology, the actual breadth of things that is out there, people don't know what to ask for. So I think it's just my thing at the minute is trying to just raise awareness with people, say that there's all this good technology. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I think the way we're trying to market it is good enough. It'll give you something more that you haven't got. And I think that's a good thing. I think if you get it in now and it's not perfect, when it gets better, athletes and sport organizations, I think will love it. I think when I do talk to people about it and kind of say, this is what it can do, I think they think it can benefit them. They never knew it existed.
Yeah. So for me, AI is one of those things where it's a super hot topic at the minute, and I'm going to fall into that band of people that doesn't know exactly what's possible. And that, I think as a human race, we're still kind of figuring this out. And, whether it's going to end up like Terminator or iRobot, who bloody knows. But one of the things I've spoke about on this podcast before, which blew my mind, is the most lengthy part about doing a podcast is actually like the social media stuff afterwards. Is like cropping up all the videos and then putting it into Instagram format. And Riverside, that we're recording on at the moment, they released a feature called Magic Clips, and it's an AI piece of technology. So it transcribes everything that you're saying, everything that I'm saying, and afterwards it pieces it into like 10 Instagram style clips. And so at the minute, I guarantee after this it'll say artificial intelligence and social media, and then boom, it's ready. So it knows what is a hot topic, which absolutely blows my mind. So I can only really imagine how this is going to be used in the future. And I know from like an S&C standpoint, I think some people are probably a little bit worried or unsure how this is going to affect their role. So I guess let's get into, I want to find out a little bit more about your research, and then let's double back and ask some really wild questions around whether we're all going to be here in 10 years in this industry. So tell us a little bit about your research, mate, and your PhD. What is it?
So the kind of overarching title we have is optimizing the use of machine learning and computer vision in sport. And that's really what AI is. AI is a nice fancy term, but all it is like teaching machines to learn very specific tasks. So just to kind of go over what it actually is basically machine learning is you feed some code, an algorithm, bits of data, whether that be video, images, performance data. Obviously, people are aware of things like ChatGPT. All ChatGPT does at a basic level is it takes all information from the internet. It's connected to the internet. It takes all things like text, numbers, things like that. And what it actually does is just predict the next word in the sentence from the internet. So when you say it like that, it doesn't sound as complicated. It's very complicated and it's brilliant. I know that. But all it does is it takes your sentence and expands it on the internet and kind of predicts the next word. That's why it's very accurate, because all it does is predict the next word in a sentence, for example. And machine learning things, it all depends on what you put into it, which is why ChatGPT is really good, because it has the internet behind it and there's so much there. Whereas if you have a small scale thing in a sports club, for example, and you don't have much data from athletes, it's not going to be very good. But my research is mainly just trying to optimize what we currently have and how we use it. So in kind of the published literature at the moment, there isn't anything that supports the application of machine learning and computer vision in sport specifically. So we say it's in sport. I'm mainly focused on athlete development programs, how we can apply it to make athletes better from a wide range of perspectives. It's physiologically, performance data, anything like that. But there's nothing there that can support people with it. And at the minute, you need such a high level of technical knowledge to apply it and to develop it. My thinking was, what are the limitations going to be if a football team, for example, they want to put in some piece of AI, whether that's automatic performance analysis system. So if people are aware, things like Knack Sport, where people can watch the video and code, like just press buttons and it'll say like kick, pass, things like that. There's technology now that does it automatically. So you just have to put the video into the data and it can detect how many passes there's been, things like that. In ice hockey, for example, it's called Iceberg. There are one or two other things. In football, there's one called Prozone. These things are extremely expensive though, so only even the top Premier League clubs use them. Not all of them do, because it's so expensive for the technology and everything. But from that perspective, I don't think it's a good idea, because the only way the top teams have it is because they have the money. They pay a company to do it, and there's no actual understanding of how it works. They're probably not getting the best out of it they can, because the company come in, put the system in, maybe tell one or two people how it works and then leave. And they're there to detect any technical issues and things, but the actual performance analyst that's using it just has this amazing technology and doesn't know how to do it. And then the technology itself, if you're a lower tier team, don't have the money, like if you're not a top football team, nobody has anywhere near the money of football. So how do you do it from a way that's actually beneficial for everybody, even at lower tiers? So we come up with kind of a collaboration framework. And what it does is, it's currently under review at the minute, the paper. So hopefully it's been under review for a couple of months. So hopefully it'll be out soon. So people can give it a read. But it uses something called the Department of Methodology, which was created by Dr. Rothwell at Sheffield Hallam. And it's basically a transdisciplinary framework that helps. It's basically a new way of thinking of how a multidisciplinary team works, how to get people collaborating. And what we've done is we've applied that in a wider framework that helps teams bring in computer scientists to collaborate with them. So rather than just having the computer scientists come in, not really integrate into the team, bringing a computer scientist into a team, getting them integrating properly, and then what they can do then is have a whole team approach to applying this technology, which I think is really important, because if you apply the technology and half the team don't even know it exists, half the team half the multidisciplinary team don't really know how it works. They might understand it a bit, but having like a whole system, we call it like a whole system approach, like a holistic approach to applying the technology, I think would be really beneficial. Obviously, at the minute, it's just a theory. We've just created a framework and it is just theory. So I'm aware there's probably practitioners thinking, oh, how would it work in practice? But that's what the research is going to go on to. We're planning on going into a sports team. I won't kind of let up about exactly what we're doing, but we're going to put AI into a sports team and see how it works, basically, see the benefits, limitations on performance, things like that. But I think the big part of the framework that is beneficial to a lot of people is the actual how we apply the technology through a theory called ecological dynamics, and it's based in psychology, and it's basically a natural way of how people interact with their environment, how athletes interact with their environment. Lots of things to think about. I won't go too much into that because it's not really to do with AI, but it's just a way of thinking when the practitioners have the technology, is how they can actually apply it in a natural way. So it's okay if you've got, at the minute, there is I don't know if some people may have seen it, in the Toronto Raptors have a AI shot board in their training center. And what it is it's a big screen, and every single shot is taken on the basketball court. It can measure the speed of it, how many spins it has. And the thing is, it looks, even if you just look at the picture, it's really overwhelming. And if you watch videos of athletes using it, they'll shoot and just look at the board straight away. They'll shoot, look at the board, and it's giving them information because it's player by player, so you can see your name and your picture up there. And if you miss, it'll try and tell you why you've missed. And what you get there is you get athletes relying way too much on the technology. Like, the technology is brilliant, and yes, it's good that we can see how many spins the ball's had, but what actual use is that for athletes and practitioners? Like, as a coach or as an athlete, you don't actually really care how much the ball spins. The only thing you care about is if it goes in or not. And athletes at that level, they probably know why they've missed, or if they do miss, it's 1 in 100. So making them, and the thing is as well, the board, just using the board as an example, they shoot and it flashes red that they've missed, and it like tracks it on the board, how many misses, how many shots they've made. And that constant feedback isn't good for athletes. From a practical perspective, it isn't healthy for athletes. So the other half of the frame, which is kind of underpinned by ecological dynamics, is how we apply the technology in a more natural, user-friendly way that is beneficial to athletes and coaches. Because there's no real reason to have extreme amount of information. There's a lot of work by Keith Davids, who's one of my supervisors around ecological dynamics, and specifically things about overcoaching with technology, using practitioners and coaches relying on technology a lot to identify their performance. And what that does is it stops athletes self-regulating. It stops them understanding their own performance. It stops them kind of using their analytical problem-solving skills, think, why did I miss that? What was different maybe with my technique? And they're relying so much on the technology. But when they actually get into a competitive performance setting, you don't have the technology there. So that's when your self-regulatory skills are needed most to either move properly, solve problem skills on the fly, say in a football match. But if you're relying on technology to do those things in training and you don't have them, so it's not saying we shouldn't use the technology. It's when athletes are trying to regulate their performance using it. So my research is mainly just focused on how we can apply the technology so it's beneficial to athletes and coaches. I think, like, going back to your point, what you said earlier about like the Terminator thing taking over the world, I think that's such a big, it's a fearmonger thing, I think, at the minute, especially in the media, is that it's not, how far we're away from that is unbelievable. And I've kind of, over the past year or so, I've kind of come up with a tagline. It's that AI isn't going to replace people. People are going to be replaced by people who can use AI. So it's people who can leverage AI, like you said with the podcast, cutting up clips, saving you time. The way we're trying to go about it is saying we can enhance practitioners is the key thing. We're trying to enhance people. Just like when we brought, decades ago, when video analysis was brought in, it was used to enhance. You can't replace the coach with video analysis. Just like with AI, you can't really replace the athlete at all, replace the coach, sorry, because athletes need the human touch. Nobody's going to be able to learn football from a young age just by AI. They need a coach. They need the personal touch, because even in the next 10, 20 years, I don't think AI is going to be able to pick up on those human cues of body language, whether someone looks tired when they walk into the training hall, those little things. And that's what being a coach is, really. I think, yes, in terms of coaches, the programming aspect might be replaced, or it might be enhanced with AI to help coaches program. But I think that's beneficial, because when you're trying to individualize training programs, for each athlete, which in ecological dynamics is like an individualized approach, is really important. And I think in sport in general, if you can individualize someone's training, it's really beneficial. And at the minute, that might not be possible. For example, even in a top sports team, yes, in a top football team, you might be able to individualize each training program, but even then, maybe not. And especially at lower leagues, when there's one coach for 3 teams, you're kind of doing generalized training programs for that team, depending on either the periodization, things like that. But that's where AI will enhance practitioners, because the coach is still going to need to be there to teach the technique, to analyze people's technique, to get across to the athletes what they're doing, why they're doing it. But people don't learn from, if you walk into a training hall, there's a monitor, it says you're doing this today. It won't really work. Like, yes, the program might be highly individualized, but you still need the coach. So I think it's the dual approach of we're not trying to replace practitioners with AI. I don't think that would, even if that does happen, it won't be for a really, really long time. And it's more just enhancing people. Like you said, like you've got the podcast software. We'll be able to, obviously, if people have played around with ChatGPT, they might have put in, make me an S&C program. And they are all right, I guess, but they're not individualized. They are, if you type that in 3 times, you'll probably get the same. You'll get a very similar response. So it doesn't have the individual nature of it, but eventually we'll get there. But you still need a coach there. You still need somebody there to deal with that. So I think just moving forward, I think that's the big message I'd like people to remember. Like, don't think AI is going to replace you, because it won't do for a really, really long time. And even then, we don't need, what it'll do is it'll just take away menial tasks. I think it will free up a lot of your time. And I think from my research perspective, from ecological dynamics, having that athlete-centered approach is really important. And if we can use AI to individualize people's programs, to actually free up practitioner workload time, it's more beneficial for the athlete, because they've got more actual time with a coach. If you've got an hour session and there's 30 people you're running an S&C program for, how much time do you actually spend with each athlete? Because you're worrying about either looking at programs, doing this, either changing someone's program if they're a bit tired today. But if we can use AI to do that, and then you just deliver it and give a more personal touch to athletes, I think athletes will really enjoy that more than anything.
Mate, there's a few things there. And mate, this all sounds absolutely sick. I've got so many points I want to jump in on. I didn't know about that Raptors thing. And I think that's a really interesting point in itself. And I agree with everything you said around overcoaching, and you can become super overwhelmed with data and analytics. And I'm like a super beginner golfer. So I go to the driving range, and we've got a launch monitor there at Rother Valley, and it's great. I can play games on it. You can play fish and all that. It can get really fun, but it gives you like specific spin. It gives you top spin. It gives you distance. It gives you, all the words I don't understand about golf, and it means nothing to me. So if I start thinking I'm 3 degrees off, well, I'm just going to miss the ball. And that is a genuine thing. Whereas when I go to have golf lessons, my golf coach, he simplifies it so much. He'll just put like my phone on the floor, and he'll put a water bottle, and he's like, swing between those 2 things. And it's like, and that solved it. And I didn't need to know about the data, but it did give me, I guess what it did do is his ability to show me some data, give me a drill, which forces me into a specific, pattern. And then I can connect those dots and be like, oh, so that's how I make it do that. And I thought that was really interesting. What's your thoughts on those points there?
So I think the golf thing, I think, is really, it illustrates the point of using data and the coach to enhance performance, to enhance athlete and coach performance. It's all about enhancing the practitioner. So what your golf coach does, some of the things you might not be able to get across because he hasn't got the data to back it up. But what we're saying is, if we use AI to do that, the quality of data that they have is better. The quality of data that they can achieve is better. So enhances the coach and the athlete more. And yeah, just going back to the point about you have the launch monitor. If you've just started playing golf, you actually have no idea what half of it means. And to most people, even professional golfers, like, yes, if you're trying to get the ball to roll into a certain position, but that's really high level golf. For most people who just go and play golf, they don't need to know that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's all about finding what data works, being specific to either the athlete or the sport, is rather than, that's what I think companies fall into the trap of, like things like TrackMan with the launch monitor. They sell it as, we can give you, just an example, we can give you 10,000 points of data on each shot, just as an example. But why do you don't need those. It's a good gimmick and it's a good selling point, because people buy it and think, oh, I've got all this information about my performance. But if you're just using it on your own, you have no idea how to use it. You've no idea how to leverage it. And that's where, going back to the framework, having a whole system approach, or rather even if it's just a coach and an athlete, having a better understanding of it all is really important. And I think going back to, and just on the Raptor point about creating high pressure situations, I think it's good to use the board for just little competitions in the game. But in terms of the high pressure situations, is if you're in a game, the high pressure situations are very simple things to put in. They are the time left on the clock and how many points you're down. That's basically it. And like, if there's a thing, you're 4 points down in a basketball game, there's 15 seconds left and it's to go through to the next round or go through to the final. Those are the situational things that create high pressure. It's not, oh, I've missed the shot and the board's going to buzz red and everyone's going to see me miss. Because if you miss the shot, everyone can see you've missed it anyway. You don't need a big red screen to tell you it's missing. I think, yes, to create little competition, it's good to have obviously competition in a team, things like that. It's good to track performance there. But these people at such a high level, they're missing maybe 1 in 100 shots. They're missing very few shots anyway. And they know they're that like the perfectionists, in a sense, they're that focused on getting as many baskets as they can. Mm-hmm. They know when they've missed. They don't need they're at the level where they can self-regulate their performance. They can understand and analyze their performance. They don't need something telling them why they've messed up. They probably know. And a lot of the time, the way someone perceives their performance, for example, is if you realize why you missed the shot, you think, oh, maybe your hand placement wasn't right. Like you said, oh, I missed the ball by 3 degrees. In terms of actually adjusting your performance, people aren't at the level, even at a professional golf level, to adjust their body 3 degrees that specifically. So it's a bit pointless in that sense. It gives people something extra to think about, because if you actually try and adjust 3 degrees, you're probably going to do it over or under. You don't know how to do it, and the performance gets worse. But if you actually have a self-regulatory performance kind of a self-regulatory approach to your performance, that's where there's benefit. And that's where we can use AI to point out things that are maybe to the coach. I think that's the thing we get across in the paper that's coming out, is that we shouldn't really give access to this technology to athletes, because they become reliant upon it. But what your coach probably does, obviously I don't know how it works, but what he probably looks at a lot more data than you will, and just feeds you the bits that he thinks are beneficial. And that's why the practitioner is so important. But what we can do is we can give the coach, like I said before, give the coach better data to look at, more data to look at, and give them a better understanding of your performance. And then they can use domain knowledge to provide you with information and cues and drills that are going to improve that specific thing. So rather than saying, they might say on the data, yeah, you're 3 degrees off here, but their domain knowledge can give you drills that'll help rectify that, without them saying, this drill is going to make you hit the ball 3 degrees this way or that way, for example.
Yeah, sick. I love it. One of the things I was just thinking across like different disciplines in sport, and one of the things we use in S&C quite a lot, and a lot of different coaches will use like programming apps, and programming apps are great because they simplify things, and they'll give you calculations, 1 rep maxes, all that type of stuff. Well, nutrition hasn't had that type of thing in a while, and people were still working off, writing a meal plan on a piece of paper or Excel spreadsheets, which was super time consuming. And there's a business that's come out fairly recently called Hexis. And what Hexis has managed to do is basically it's like MyFitnessPal on steroids, essentially.
Mm.
But they've taken all of the up-to-date data around nutrition and carb cycling and high days and low days, and you're a typical ectomorph, whatever, and it's gearing your carb ratios towards you. And I thought that was super interesting, how, and that's not, I don't even know if that's technically AI or whether that's literally just like a blanket, algorithm they've got in place that doesn't actually update. But I think that to me is like, fuck, there's so much we can learn from different elements of sports science. If we just shared a little bit more, I think there'd be some brainstorms going on.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of those things they are very good. They give you a lot of, when we say individualized, those things aren't really individualized to your specific person, but they are super tailored to your group. So obviously, if you've got 100,000 people using the app or using, for example, the Whoop thing that's come out that loads of people are using, is what it does is, I don't know exactly how it's, but the premise is it groups people together in their exact. So if, for example, the way you train, there might be a few other people that train very similar to you, and it'll tailor the recommendations slightly, but it'll group you together rather than perfectly individualizing it. It'll still give you really good personalized macros, training programs, things like that. But what it does is it kind of groups people together in the algorithm that are similar and gives them similar recommendations. So it actually is personalized. It's a lot better than you'll get from anything else. And it is AI. It does use things because it takes into account sleep, what you've eaten, how you train, things like that. And that's where it becomes individualized. To do individualization really specifically, for example, there is things at the minute that can predict when people are going to get injured using AI. And they can give scores on when people are at high risk of injury. Obviously, it's not good enough to wait if you get an acute injury. If there's a bad tackle, you get injured. It's not a magic ball, but what it does is there are plenty of things if people can read systematic reviews and things about it. What it does is practitioners can take in training load data. So things, they can do training load data, anthropometric measurements. They can do things like subjective measures as well. So if someone's tired, if someone's sore. And there's a really good study, I'm just using football as an example, because what they did is, in Aussie rules football though, is they took 300 athletes and got all of their training load data and anthropometric measurements. And what they did is predicted when people were going to get injured or a high risk of injury from season to season. And when they put it in, the injury rates dropped a lot. And that's really good because people think, they're just stopping people training. But actually, obviously the ready to play state of the team is higher because you've got more. Yes, you might have someone off for a week, but if they're off for a week, that'll slower their injury rate and then they won't be out for a month or two. And that's really good. Those things, though, are what I would tell people about AI is the quality of data you put into it is what you get out of it. So people have tried to do injury prediction just on subjective data. So if someone's sore, if they've got sore hamstrings a lot, did they sleep well? That kind of data, it's easy to do because you can get a lot of data. If you can give someone an app on the phone, just type in numbers like when they wake up. And that's really easy to do and really quick to do, but the accuracy of it is quite poor. But if you want to have really accurate predictions, you've got to take fitness test data. Like sometimes you do anthropometric data, you can do scans on people, and that's when it becomes really good. So I think people have got to find a middle ground of what actually works. But yeah, like you said, the nutrition aspect of performance and individualizing it, it's all good. I think it's all good for practitioners to use, for general athletes, especially if you've not got a coach or anything, if you're just trying to do it on your own back. These things are really good to use. They're not perfect in any sense, but what really is in sport, they're not perfect, but they just give you something to enhance your performance, whether that's individualizing your training program, individualizing how you sleep or how you eat. They're just really good. And I think they can be used by practitioners as well. Because when you combine AI technology, as I mentioned, like the golf coach would do, you combine AI technology with practitioners and their domain knowledge, and you get something even better. So you get really good data, really good knowledge, combine them together, and in theory, it should just propel people even higher. That's the big thing missing in the research at the minute, and something we want to do is people have not actually applied AI for a long period of time and seen performance improvements or performance differences. They've not examined performance differences. Things like the injury thing's been done, but nothing in terms of if you want to look at technique analysis, things like that. So that's a big area at the minute that we're trying to get into.
I think what you mentioned there around, predicting injury, and I think this is one of those, I'm going to say like a hot topic, and people will debate this all the time. And what you mentioned before around like wellness questionnaires of, okay, you wake up in the morning, how did you sleep? Scale of 1 to 10, whatever that is. And, it's useful information to have because we use it as well as part of our online program with our athletes. And essentially, it's probably the most basic piece of information you can get is subjective. Am I going to change my program too much from that? Maybe. It depends. Ultimately, it's what it does for me is like promotes a conversation with that person to be like, okay, you mentioned that you slept a 1 out of 10 and you're usually a 9. So what's going on? Okay. Getting divorced, whatever that thing is. And I think this is where I honestly don't know enough about the research, what you said there around, okay, using fitness testing data, using everything all together to give a prediction. I don't know if it's a prediction rating or like a percentage thing. And mate, that's one of those with it. I think there's going to be people that will be like, oh, don't know about that. But I think this is one of those where if that is the future, then that can only be a good thing. Because there's so much that goes into it, isn't there? Like you said, contact. Okay, if you get a contact injury, you play rugby, you're going to take a few knocks. And it's, mate, I honestly don't know where to go with that one. But I think, is there anything that kind of jumped out there for you?
I think for me, it's like you said, it's just combining as much as we can. Like I think the thing about AI is that I try and get across to people is it's not perfect. It's not like what you see on, like if you watch the news and like they say, oh, this AI has done some miraculous thing. Like in sport, it's not that good. It's not going to change. It will change the world. It will. I'm not saying it won't, but you can't expect to put it in and it be perfect. Like with the subjective data, like the injury thing, it's not going to predict every injury you've got in your team. It just won't do that. But nothing will. But if you can predict 3 or 4, why not? Why not use it? And that's what I think we're trying to get across. We're not trying to solve the world. I'm not trying to sit here and say, look, we can do everything that people want us to do, because it isn't possible. But if we can do a bit here and a bit there, if we can save some practitioner time here, if we can give people more understanding of their athlete's performance, why not? If we can predict a few injuries, why not? Like, we're not saying if someone gets a bad contact injury, then we can't stop that. But like you said, if it's an overuse thing, if we can stop that, then why not? I think something else to say is that with the injury, one is some people try and do it for the whole body, and it's not brilliant because you're trying to predict injuries across the whole body. But in football, there's a lot of research on hamstring and ACLs and things like that, which are really good and quite accurate. And that's something I think in football will be becoming more of a thing or just in sport in general. If you're in a sport where there's a specific injury all the time, for example, in baseball, there's a lot of shoulder injuries, elbow injuries, and starting to predict when that's getting to a critical point, I think will be a big thing over the next few years. But it is just one of them cases where if you want to do it just off subjective things, that's when you need to use the coach more. If someone, like you said, if someone's tired all the time and you've got the AI and it's saying it might not be as accurate because there's no actual physical data, but it's just combining those things. I think that's a big thing with AI. You can combine AI and domain knowledge to make people better. If you just want to do it subjectively, you're going to have to use the coach a lot more. But I think going back to the framework we created is the framework kind of approves for a big holistic approach, especially in sports teams. When you have just one coach, it's difficult. But if you've got a football team, you've got a physiologist, you've got a psychologist, you've got a skills coach, they can all work together, all provide data that they collect because they collect data all the time from their athletes, provide it to computer scientists and work as a group. And then you get something that's better than you could do working individually or just working as a physiologist or just working with a psychologist. It's like a holistic approach and a whole system approach to athlete performance, which is what people think the multidisciplinary team is. And really it isn't, because what you do is you have a multidisciplinary team of 30 staff. They never sit down together, very rarely. And if they do, it's like the head of each department and they feed things back. And if they do collaborate, I kind of think of it as like a pseudo collaboration. They collaborate through the athlete. The physiologist works and then they get passed to another department, then they get passed to another one, then they get passed to the coach. And yes, they're all working together towards the same goal, but they don't actually collaborate with each other, if that makes sense. I think, and that's where if you bring AI in, you probably have to do that because you get so much more out of it. There's much more, if you much more data, much more buy-in from everyone working towards the same goal, it'll be a lot more beneficial for that approach.
Love it. Mate, and there's one bit that I want to kind of jump on before we move on to, because I want to speak a little bit more around the collaboration piece, is the injury stuff. And I think that was something that, you know, a lot of sports will have different dashboards and different kind of performance testing measures at the beginning of a season. So if we take hamstrings, for example, okay, we know that there's a certain amount of risk factors that are going to be associated with somebody getting that. Okay, so it might be your pelvis position. If you're a little bit more anteriorly tilted, then the hamstring is more on stretch, so it's going to be in a more vulnerable position. Fatigue is going to come into that. Stride length might be a thing. We can then start looking at, have you reached 95% of your max speed volume? Have you gone over that volume in the previous week? Are you playing 3 times? You can then start stacking on top all your subjective stuff around sleep and hydration and all that. Essentially, how I kind of interpreted what you was going to say there is AI is going to group together all the different risk factors in a sense and be like, okay, this is what we reckon. This is all the information. Based on what we've seen around previous hamstring injuries, this seemed to be like a little bit of a red flag. There it is. Do what you want to do with it, but that's the info. Is that essentially how you see this being used?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing. I think we're not trying to replace practitioners. It's just something practitioners can use. We're not saying you should build your whole development program on it, but it gives practitioners another like kind of string to their bow, if that makes sense. It gives them something else to use. Yes, it's very good and it can give you a lot of data, but it just gives practitioners something else to use, to implement into when it's needed. And it's just something else to think about. I think it's just enhancing practitioners in a different way than we do already by lots of different things. And I think that's the main thing, is just having a whole system approach, giving all the departments in a football team access to some form of AI that they can use, that they can rely on when they need to. But we're not saying you have to use this all the time. It's giving people that option of way they want to do it. And you do get pushback from coaches that think, I've always done it this way and this way works. But I think but why not try something different? Because we're not saying you have to use it all the time, but this technology is so good that people are, at the minute, it's getting more in the media, but in sport, people aren't using it as much as for very specific things. They're using general things like the automatic tracking to save time, but there's so much more we can do for athlete benefit, like the injury thing, things about just moving on to like a technique analysis. So normal technique analysis would have to be done in biomechanics terms with 3D passive marker motion capture. When you put the white dots on people, you make them stand in a lab and it tracks the movement. And that's really accurate, don't get me wrong. But you have to take the athlete out of their training environment, go to a lab. It's very expensive to hire. And now we can do something called pose estimation. And what it does is it estimates the location of people's joints within a video frame and can track movement that way, rather than having to do. It's not as accurate as motion capture by any stretch of the imagination, but it's very good. It's good enough, is what we say a lot. It's good enough to give coaches good understanding of someone's technique. They can train, for example, in ecological dynamics, there's something called representative performance environments, and they're training environments that have the same constraints as the performance environment. So that's, for example, a football team. If they're training on a football pitch like they would in the game, that's a very representative performance environment. But if you're trying to measure someone's kicking technique in a lab, maybe on a hard floor, there's no wind, there's no weather, that's not a representative performance environment. And that's been shown to change how people perform based on the constraints around them. So what we can do is we can do the technique analysis on a football pitch, for example. It's not brilliant, it's not perfect, and it's not good for like research terms, but for giving coaches a better understanding of someone's performance, it's really good. And it's not, for example, there are obviously kinematic variables that are like angles in people's joints and things. At the minute, it's not quite up to scratch for some movements to analyze people's techniques, so I'd not recommend people use that at the minute, but eventually it's going to get there. But you can use things at the minute called spatial temporal variables, which are the speed somebody kicks, or the speed somebody throws the ball, like the speed the arm moves, the speed the shoulder moves, speed the wrist moves, they're good enough. Like we can do that at the minute, and it's just giving coaches something else to think about, like something else to use. For example, from an S&C perspective, you could use it to see which leg's kicking faster, which leg's kicking slower in football. And just those little things can help you, for example, see if someone's got a disparity in strength, or a performance disparity in each leg, or rather than having to break the force plates out or go and do a 3D motion capture in a lab, then yeah.
Mate, that's super. Is that expensive? So what you're speaking around that final bit, is that something that's kind of readily available, or do you think it will kind of become quite commercial and it's...
Anybody can do that now. If you have some coding experience, the thing I'll direct people towards is something called MediaPipe, and it's a Google website. Just type it in on Google, and it gives people a step by step. You have to have some coding experience, but it's not that difficult to learn with things like ChatGPT and things like that. You can code. They give you the model. The model is the hardest part to create, but they'll give you a model to use. And there's step-by-step guides of you can apply like how to put a video into a coding thing and run the model on it. And you can get things like that now. It is possible, like for free. Someone can sit at home, do it themselves. Obviously, there's a learning curve because you have to learn to code and things. But there's so much online now, and with ChatGPT and like everybody who codes, I code and use ChatGPT all the time because it saves you so much time. If you've got problems with your code, it's just like going back to the enhancing people outside of sport as well, is using ChatGPT, things like that saves you so much time. I have so much more hours in the day when I'm coding because I use things like that, and it's so much easier. And it's people say, oh, it's like I might be cheating using that, and it's like, but why not? It's not. There's no. It doesn't. I don't get extra points for writing code myself. So it's just. No, so people can do it now. The really accurate stuff. The big thing is the equipment, so the camera and things you use to analyze performance. So that human pose estimation comes under the umbrella of kind of computer vision, which is still within the AI space. And the thing that makes that work well is a really good camera, because if it's blurry or not very good quality, that affects it. So that's probably your thing that costs the most. But if you can just do tests, you can download like a really good quality video of someone kicking a football and just run a test yourself. Like it might take you a few hours or a few days to learn, but people can go out there now and do it. There's no paywall. Coding is free. The MediaPipe is just an example, but there's other things of people have already written models. I think it's just using things that people have given you and just having a play with it, because that's where the space is going. Is people who can do a bit of everything, I think, is going to be good.
Love it. So there was something I wrote down earlier. Are you a UFC fan? Do you ever watch UFC?
I do watch UFC sometimes, yeah.
So I'm thinking back to Leon Edwards and Usman. Don't know if you saw that fight.
No, I've watched highlights of it, but no, I didn't see the full thing.
So essentially, the idea being that Leon Edwards was down for 4 rounds, and then in the final round, managed to head kick Usman, won the fight. Kind of an upset loss. Kind of turned it round. And looking back on, there's some analysis of how he managed to do that, and in UFC and kickboxing, boxing, all that. There's a lot of faking and feinting, trying to force your opponent to make a mistake, lean into a certain direction so you can land the shot. So I was thinking back to my thoughts about performance analysis when I used to do sports science undergrad, was you get dartfish, this many passes, this many kicks, type of thing. So I'm like, is there a way already, or do you see it being a future thing, where AI or performance analysis is really going to be able to identify the little things like faking and feinting? Not saying that itself will be the information that will lead to a win, but it's more information for the coach to have of like, okay, Cavan, he always leans to his left. So I'm going to kick to the left more. Is that a thing?
Yeah. So, I don't think so. In terms of the published things, there are quite a few performance analysis like tools using AI that measure punches. So it's been applied in Muay Thai, so punches, kicks, left punch, right hook, things like that. So the technology is there. All you have to do would be to code it to analyze the feints. I don't think in the papers I've read they've done the feint, but I think the technology is there to do it. I don't think there would need to be. I don't think it's been done, but I think that there's not needed to be a technological advancement for it to be done.
Yeah.
I think it could be done now if somebody wanted to. And yeah, that's, I think it's a big thing. Like you mentioned with like analysing someone faints, if they always fake with this leg before they kick, or if they faint with this punch before they kick, or things like that would be something that would be really interesting to look at for someone who works. I've not seen it in UFC, well, in MMA applied, but I imagine it's easily possible because it's been done I think it started with boxing, and then someone did it in like Muay Thai and kickboxing, and the movements have got more complicated. I think at the minute, it's probably difficult to do the groundwork, like analyze the groundwork in terms of what people are doing, because the bodies are so close together and wrapped up. The cameras might have a difficult time, but I don't think it would take much work to do it. The way you learn, just going back, if people aren't aware, the way we teach algorithms to identify, for example, in boxing, to identify punches, is what we do is we feed it videos that have kind of points annotated. So we'll feed it a video saying this is what a left punch looks like, and we feed it hundreds of videos. And then when you give it a video that isn't annotated, so it's like a blank video, it can like recognize what a left punch is or a right hook. So I think all it would take is somebody to create those videos in kickboxing or in MMA for the feints. If you can put a video of someone doing a feint and recognize what it is, get a set of variables down for what a right leg feint is, a full feint, a half feint, things like that, and make the videos for it. I think it's possible. I don't think there's any technological things. There are a lot in AI you can do that hasn't been done because it just takes time. But in terms of the technology developing, not really. I can't imagine there's much in the way of it being done now. If someone's got the time and energy to do it, then I think it's quite easily possible. And you don't know what's been done until it comes out in a research paper or online. So there might be somebody doing it now, to be honest. So it just depends, really.
Yeah, and whether it'd be useful or whatever. But I wrote that down because when we were on about you saying AI coming into a team and having like somebody there that's there to essentially identify problems and just assist, be the person that's going to assist. I'm thinking back to some sports where I know there are problems there where we're like, fuck, if I just had more time, or had this, would that be useful? Because if I think back to my time in like combat sports, it's like you'd sit down with a coach approaching a fight and, you'd have a little bit of a debrief on the guy you're going to be fighting. And you'd be like, okay, right, as a pressure fighter, he comes forward, he does this a lot, he does that a lot. And it's like, well, if AI is just there to back that up a little bit or even save the coach time that you can identify snapshots in the YouTube videos. I just thought that's just where my mind went straight away.
That's easily possible because you could, because at the minute all that happens is if you want to analyze someone's fights, is you sit down and watch all their fights. But what you could do is if you apply a similar system like you use for the podcast about people fainting or when they score this kick, but what AI would be able to do is instead of you watching all the videos, it would be able to analyze their past 10 fights and give you, like you said, the snippets of it. So it's like going back to just the key points, it reduces practitioner workload. It gives people better quality of information. It might miss one or two things, but the vast majority of stuff is there. And like I said, it just takes someone to do it. It's not out of the realms of possibility that for any obvious reason now, because it couldn't be done now in any sport really, in boxing, especially combat sports, especially when a lot of the analysis is on the opponent and what they do. I think that's really important.
Sick. Right. So let's put a tinfoil hat on them. What's next? Like, what is the future? What if I was to ask you of like, right, what's it going to be in 20 years? Like, what's going on?
I think. I'll split the question up into two. I'll answer it in two parts. I'll do it from like a professional in a sports team kind of answer, and then I'll do it as like someone in the general population just wants to get fitter. So I'll do the general population bit first. I think the things like the Whoop, Fitbit, things like that are just going to get miles better. They are going to become super individualized. You're going to be able to put in so many different things about your dietary requirements, all these things. It's going to give you super individualized training. I think in terms of, I think the data collection aspect of it as well is going to become a lot more accurate, because I know at the minute it says it tracks your sleep, but I don't really know how accurately does it, how well does it do it. I think all those things are going to get better. So it's going to provide better quality, better individualized training approaches. I think things like that need input from, like, I don't really know how they create the training programs and things, but I think if you had really good periodized high quality training programs, like in those systems, it'd be really good. I think also from a general practice point is an app that can analyze, especially in the gym, if you're doing a back squat or something, it can use the pose estimation tracking aspect. It can learn how you do the squat is really important. It can learn how you do the squat, and every time you squat, it can record it. It can give you things like, so at the minute, very basically, we can through a video camera, we can find people's rate of force development through a camera. We don't need force plates or anything. It's not as accurate, but it's getting there. So just through a video, this is where I think would be brilliant for gym goers, would be an app that can analyze all different types of movement, whether that be a count movement, jump, deadlift, snatch, everything. It can give you individualized performance recommendations, so highly individualized depending on how you squat, because obviously there isn't a perfect back squat. It's all depends on the individual. So something like that, and then wrapped up in that, maybe, like you said, rate of force development, like performance metrics as well, things like what a gym aware does, but through a camera. So I know there's things at the minute that is it the metric VBT thing that measures velocity through the camera? Mm-hmm. I've used it a bit. Sometimes I think it's spot on, and then sometimes it's like miles off. So I think those things being more accurate and it being wrapped up in one thing. So there might be things where you can analyze performance now, might be something that does this, something that does that. But I think if someone can get an app together for gym goers that not only can teach the basics, so it teaches you how to do a back squat, but then it can kind of track your evolution. If you record every back squat you do, it'll continuously learn, continuously give you recommendations and follow you along the journey. Because I think there are some fitness apps that like teach you how to do a back squat very basically, but to actually do a really good low bar back squat like a powerlifter would, you need a coach for that, really. So I think something that wraps all that up would be fantastic and would take over the fitness industry. I think that would be something that would, if I was a PT, I'd be worried about coming in the next 10, 15 years, where not only would it be able to program people, it would be able to give them training record. I think that's what's good about PTs, is that they can constantly give you performance improvements during the session, which nothing else really does. That's why, when using AI in 10, 20 years to give you those performance metrics, it might be able to do it actually more accurately because it's using data rather than someone's perception. It probably might be a bit better, especially if it can learn how you squat based on your anthropometric measurements and get you an optimal squat, for example. I think would be brilliant. I think in terms,
Mate, that's I love it. What do you think that's going on already? Do you think that's happening behind the scenes? Because like you just giving out that gold mine right there. If somebody's got a few grand and the know-how, that'd be where I would try and invest in that straight away.
Yeah. No, I think I've actually heard what one or two people think of similar things, but not anything as ambitious as that. I think in terms of the technology at the minute, I don't think it's possible because in terms of AI, you have things like heavy models and light models. So like light models are less accurate and they can work on someone's phone. And then you have like heavy models that you need like a supercomputer, but they're extremely accurate. So to do things like that, you might need like a heavy model, but obviously you need someone to do it on the phone. So it's not as accurate and things like that, but it's not a million miles away. I think in the next 10 years, you could have something really decent built. But I think technologically at the minute, it probably is not possible. Just the second part of that question in terms of like sports teams, where I think it is going, I think gold, like if I could predict something that would be amazing for sports teams, is just having AI integrated throughout the whole system in basically every department, doing something that is basically not possible. So like predicting injuries perfectly based on everything. So you get to a point where people aren't injured unless they're in like an acute contact injury. There's no overuse injuries, anything like that. You get to a point where the S&C coaches are getting programs from AI that are extremely individualized. They take into account the data from other departments. I think that's crucial. So if somebody is got a high risk of injury, that could translate into the programming in the S&C department, and their programs change because they've got an inflamed left hamstring, but they can still train, but their training loads are lower, and then the nutrition and everything feeds into that. Your sleep specialist, and they all can use it to analyze sleep properly. I think just a whole system approach to using AI to enhance everybody, save everybody time, get everybody better quality of data. And I think in the team sport aspect, that's not actually that far away. If a team had the willingness to do it, they probably could. Like, maybe not perfect. Maybe not. You probably would still have an odd injury here and there, and to actually get it up off the ground where the systems link, and it would take a lot of money and but I think it would enhance the athlete development programs across sports soon. When people get on to actually how they apply it, is it worth it? I think it's going to blow up in sports teams, because it's at the end of the day as well. I think the thing is it could save people a lot of money. Because people won't be working as much. Like sports teams, a coach might get paid a lot to program 20 athletes, and it might take them 8 hours to program 20 athletes with a highly individualized program. But AI can do it in a minute. So it's, you know what I mean? So I think that for sports teams, I think we're actually closer to that from a sports team, but I think it's the willingness to do it. Obviously, you've worked in sport, people's an old way of thinking of like, I've done this for years, we've done this for years, this has worked. Yeah. And that's what's different. I think, for example, like at the minute, Brighton Football Club against AI, they've come up with a new way of bringing players in cheap, making them really good. And that went against like what top 6 clubs do of buying the best players, and actually Brighton are better, and people are trying to copy what they're doing now because it saves money. You get better players, they fit in the system. So if you do that with AI of save people money, the system all works together, I think we're not that far away from that.
Well, mate, I think what you said there is really like interesting, because it sounds horrible saying, but there will be there is a dying out process of humanity. And you look at kids now that are 15, 16, 17 using chat GPT to get the GCSEs and stuff. Like they're using technology in such a way where the same problems that my mum used to have just doesn't apply anymore, because we're so much more savvy. So and I think we're probably in that in-between stage of like technology is advancing, but we don't know it all yet. Give it 100 years and like the same problems we have are just not going to be the same. So I think that's sick. And I like those types of conversations because I have no clue. You see the fear-mongering thing, and you mentioned that before around this is going to happen, but to actually have somebody who is super well read in this area, but also in sport is really cool to listen to. Right, I'm going to give you a selfish question, mate. Right, so my business at the moment is online S&C coaching. Okay, so we work with individuals, they pay me. We deliver an MDT style. Okay, we have the physio, we have the nutrition, the psychology, we have the S&C. All works online. How do I make that quicker? How do I make that better? How do I turn this into a multi-million-dollar thing? And this might be before you answer the question where I completely cut it off for everybody, so they just need to they might not get this. Tell me, what do you reckon?
I think using AI to save time. So the thing is with online coaching, if you do it well and don't just because it sounds what you're doing with the multidisciplinary approach sounds like a very good online coaching program. But you see some online coaches where they just all they do is send out cookie cutter programs. They're just like, if you see on TikTok, buy my program. There's no actual coaching. It's just the program. The way you're doing it, the problem with it is it's not scalable enough because you only have so much time. If you're selling yourself as the coach, you can only coach so many people at once. Even if you want to make it a multi-million-pound business, there's only so many hours in a day. You can't coach so many people. So I think the few things you can do now to save you time so you can bring more people on, are using AI to help you write programs. To help you, like you said, just like the little things like making clips of like the podcast and things like that. I think having AI to, like, I think the programs is a big thing. Is the programs at the minute, individualizing programs, does that probably take you the most time?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, for sure. So the thing, I think that's probably a really good point. The stuff that takes me the most time is having the programs being written, okay, and the actual communication with the athlete to see what's going well, what's not going well, what is the week change like, do we need to integrate, the injury stuff into that. So that's where the time is spent. All the systems are pretty much built, but you're right in what you're saying around scalability, because if I get to 65 years old, am I still going to be doing this? How do I?
I think that's the thing. Like, from a business point, is that if you're selling yourself, obviously you've got the Adapt brand. It's not like the Jordan Webster online coaching brand. I think that helps. And this is not really about AI, but just from a business perspective, if you sell the Adapt Performance way rather than selling the Jordan Webster coaching thing, that makes it more scalable. Because if you're selling yourself and then someone buys your coaching program and then you're getting coached by somebody else, it puts people off, I guess. But if you're selling the Adapt Performance way of online coaching, it doesn't necessarily have to be you doing it. So that makes it more scalable of bringing other coaches in. And then I also think with from an AI perspective, if you're using AI to help you program, it doesn't really matter if you're using the AI or somebody else's. If it's built on your principles of programming and things like that, what it spits out is going to be similar if you write it or if somebody else writes it. And even if you get to a point where you get one person in to write some programs with AI, all you have to do is review them, which is a lot quicker, and then frees up more time for you to either get somebody else on or market different things or things like that. I think the big thing what you got to think about is what takes you the most time. What can AI do? I think the programming thing is the big thing, what takes you the most time. So use AI to do that. And just do one bit at a time rather than trying to do everything at once. Don't try and like overhaul your whole business with it. But if you do a bit of one thing at once and then just baby steps and build it up, save yourself more time, do more things, I think it'll blow you up more.
Mate, and you know what? I think that's this probably going back to Whoop and individualized programmings and stuff like that. I definitely feel like that's going to happen. Like 100%. Because if you gave me enough time and you said, right, I want you to write, fuck it, I don't know, 1,000 programs, but you need, I don't know, 100 different streams. That'd be how I'd go about it. You have like 10 different base programs which tick the initial boxes. And then, okay, we know what the next phase is probably going to look like, but maybe we just give 5 different variations of that first program based on, I hated that exercise. This went well, that didn't well. I think you could create like this huge spider web or just like tree system from that. And I could do that today. I think most S&C coaches and PTs, if you gave them enough time, would be able to create enough programs for each eventuality if you just asked the right questions and had the right data to support it.
Yeah, and like little things of just using to save you, like just obviously trying to do it from all AI and having loads of different programs is one thing, but even little things where you might give someone a program and they don't like 3 or 4 exercises on it, using AI to change that, and rather than saying, I don't like back squat, do a leg press, like just change it, using AI to give you different ideas and different exercise ideas. And I think the big thing is saving you time, especially from a business perspective. If you're trying to scale and the big thing is time, using AI to save you time and, like I said, reduce practitioner workload is the big thing for you. So just find what takes you the most time and just use some form of it. You don't have to use AI to program every single program, but maybe try it on an athlete or 2 here, see how it works, see what doesn't, and then move from there. Then you can kind of go as you like. You can kind of just keep changing as you go. I wouldn't recommend maybe doing the whole thing at once, because if you run into a problem and it all comes crumbling down, that's not what you want. But like little changes to save you half an hour here and an hour there. Like if you save yourself half an hour a day over a week, you get an extra what? Like 3-4 hours a week, and which is quite a lot of time really when you think of it. So just little things like that, I think, where a lot of people kind of miss up with AI. They think, I want it to do something amazing and change my world, when you can do so many, just a few little things like saving you an hour a day because you don't have to read code or you don't have to program or you don't have to do this. I think is really important. I think it's really, really big for people. If just change your mindset of like, I don't want it. because people, you read the media and they're like, oh, AI is going to change the world. And then when you implement it, people sometimes are a bit disappointed because it doesn't do as much as they think. But if you go into the mindset, I just want to save myself half an hour, I just want to save myself an hour here and either make the quality of this better or whatever, I think that's a big thing. I think that the communication bit that I said you takes a lot of time, I think there's probably not really a way you can get around that as much. I suppose you could use like some AI to make replies better, I guess. But I think the personable touch is what people are paying for. So maybe the programming bit's probably a bit of a better option at the minute.
Man, I think, yeah, it's going back to that. Is I actually really enjoy the whole process. I fucking love it. You know, it might not make me, Warren Buffett. Yeah. I might not be Donald Trump next year. But I do enjoy the programming. I love looking at a problem and trying to solve it through exercise and sets and reps and having that. But going back to, just building on that, some of the things we have done to, well, it wasn't actually to save time, to be honest with you. We did it for different purposes, but you create 10 different warm-ups at the beginning. Okay. Well, there we go. Like, instead of me having to write it 10 different times for 10 different people, I've just got the templates there. You tell me you've got, I know, a hip flexor issue. I'll just swap out one exercise for that and it ticks the box. And we do it for everything. Well, not everything. We do it for like some core circuits. We do it for our arm circuits, mate. And we've got some sick arm circuits. We've got Lord Swolled them up. We've got Donald Pump. We've got Armageddon. So we've got like loads of different ones there. And okay, it saves me time, but they're buzzing because they get to do a session that one of the other lads in the group is doing, and everyone's combined. You've got that community aspect of everyone.
And that's the big thing. I think even just using AI to make a few more specific things. So like, you could use AI to write me a leg circuit that takes into account someone's got left knee pain, or to strengthen the left knee. Like those, you can use it to make highly specific programs and just get the template, rather than trying to maybe not individualizing it, but just like you said, you've got 10 different warm-ups or 10 different arm circuits. You can use AI to get 15, and then you can provide a more specific approach, and it actually doesn't take you much time to create them, because you can use AI to create them. And then the big thing I would say is just you use your knowledge of S&C to tailor them. Some stuff it comes up is rubbish, some stuff it comes up is crap, but it's just a base that it can give you, and then you read through it, or your coaches read through it, and that's where you can get a lot of scalability, because you're saving so much time and you're still adding in your quality as an S&C coach into the programs. Is a big thing.
Mate, sick. I love it. I'm gonna think about whether I keep that section in or not. Maybe there's some gold there that I just keep to myself. Mate, I think that's a really good point to finish on there. I just want to thank you for your time. That was absolutely unreal. That was just super eye-opening for me, who is just not involved in this space. So yeah, really appreciate that. In terms of like future, I guess, information either from you, I don't know if you put much out on social media. If you don't, is there any kind of go-to sources to learn a little bit more in this area?
Yeah, I'm actually a bit rubbish with social media and Twitter and LinkedIn and that kind of thing. I'm not really, I probably should do more of it, but no. The best things, I think, if you want to have a go at AI yourself, the media pipe stuff's really good, because it gives you the base, what we call the models. It gives you the base code, and then it gives you guides and there's examples that you can follow. Just have a read of little things. I wouldn't necessarily go on BBC News and just type in AI, because you'll get some fearmonger thing, but have a think of a problem in your career, or if you're in a sports team, have a problem. If you've got a problem like we mentioned about programming, just have a look online at how people are using AI to program, or how people, if you're in a technique-based sport, you look at pose estimation. Best thing is honestly things like YouTube, because people like to show off when they've made new models and new things like that. So they'll put a YouTube video up, or on LinkedIn, get involved with computer scientists, and because people do like to show off. So when they make something cool, they'll like to put a video up of it, and then just read that and just go down the rabbit hole of, if you read a phrase like pose estimation, read about it. There's different ways you can do it. Or the injury stuff, have a look at. The best way to look at the injury stuff is there's quite a few systematic reviews. If you just type in using machine learning to predict injury in sport, there's 2 or 3 like quite recent systematic reviews that have come out that summarize how the thing actually works. And then obviously it's got references to all the papers in there that you can look at them individually, how they've done it, because there's different approaches, like we mentioned, that you can go down and have a read. So, but just things like Twitter as well is really good. There's a lot of people like computer scientists and things, not necessarily academics or in sport, but a lot of the things that I mentioned kind of came from computer science, and we've applied them, and people have applied them in sport. So that's where it comes from. So follow computer scientists, people online that you might not have heard of before are really, really good to look at, and they'll put things out there that are like that's crazy. So yeah, I think just online really, and talk to different people in the space is always good as well.
Sick, mate. Again, really, really appreciate your time today. That was quality.
Yeah.
No worries. Thank you.